Let's talk about candle wax. Which candle wax is best for beginners? So this is going to be a bit of a short video and it's aimed at beginner candle makers. So if you're already making candles, I wouldn't worry about this one as it is just very basic. So when I first started making candles, I didn't really know what wax to pick. So I just went on eBay and I found something and I got it delivered. I tried to make a candle and it turned out horrible. There was frosting, there were sinkholes, there were wet spots, and it just didn't work. I didn't know a thing about wicking. I just thought if I melted something, put some scent in it, set it in a candle jar, I have made a candle. How wrong was I? And it turns out the wax I bought was pillar wax, so there was no wonder it turned out to be a dreadful candle. So with that said, when you're starting out with candle making, you need to decide on what kind of candle you want to make. Do you want to make pillar candles or do you want to make container candles? Container candles look like this and like this. They are essentially set in containers. They could be in tins, they could be in glass jars, they could be in anything. That's why it's called a container candle. Or you could make pillar candles, which are nice freestanding candles. The things you see in different beautiful shapes, you could get ones in the shapes of bodies, the shape of body parts, or they get those little bubbly ones. So they're essentially freestanding candles. So the wax for pillar candles is very hard. It needs to be hard to maintain its shape. And the wax for container candles is quite soft because it sort of needs to stick to the edges and it just needs to melt down properly. So they're both got different sort of properties. Once you've decided on the kind of candle you want to make, whether it's pillar or whether it's container, then you need to decide on the kind of wax you want to make. So there's lots of different types of wax. Just to name a few, you've got soy wax, you've got paraffin wax, you've got beeswax, you've got palm wax, you've got coconut wax. There are loads of different waxes and they've all got their pros and cons. So the big one is paraffin wax. That's what a lot of big candle makers use. Think of the biggest candle makers in the world, candle shops, and that wax is probably paraffin that they're using. So the benefits to paraffin wax is one, it's quite cheap, and two, it has a really good cold throw and a really good hot throw. So that's why a lot of candle makers use it, because it's solid and it's reliable. You get a good scent throw, and that's what keeps people coming back buying it, because you get a lovely smelly candle. What's the point of making candles if they don't smell good? But it does burn down quite quickly and it does have adverse health effects, potentially anyway. And one of the downsides of paraffin wax is you get a lot of wet spots. So when you go to a shop and you see a candle and it's got all those sort of like patchy bits over it, those are wet spots. That's where the candle wax is pulling away, because paraffin wax can be quite a hard wax, and as you get temperature variations, the wax just pulls away from the glass jar, which is why you get wet spots. So paraffin wax is really good, it's quite cheap, it's a good start if you do want to make really smelly candles. But if you want to get something with slightly more ecological benefits, that is vegan and plant-based, soy wax is what you want to look at. Now, if you want to make container candles or pillar candles with sort of more sustainable, eco-friendly, vegan, plant-based wax, then soy is the next go-to. It's really popular, used by a lot of candle makers, and it's what I use at the moment. So there's a few things to say with soy wax is, one, you lose a bit of the scent throw with it. It's not got the best scent throw in the world. You can get some good soy waxes, which are pretty good, but it's never going to compete with paraffin wax. It just simply isn't. And it does burn a lot slower. So you do get a lot more sort of bang for your buck. Because it burns really slow, it lasts a lot longer. So a candle jar like that will last equally as long as a massive, big paraffin wax candle. So there are pros and cons to it in that respect. And for me, if you pick the right kind of soy wax, you get beautiful glass adhesion, so it sticks to the side. You don't get any wet spots, you don't get any frosting, but it's all about picking the right one. And the wax I'm using at the moment is SCX wax, which is a blend of coconut and soy. But I lose out on a bit of like hot throw and cold throw by picking a wax which is more aesthetically pleasing, because it sticks to the outside. And because I'm using these lovely see-through sort of honey jars, I want it to look good. A lot of people aren't too bothered about wet spots, but personally I am, so that's why I picked this wax. But like I said, I lose out on some of the cold and hot throw, but it's simply the price you need to pay. And that's kind of the whole point of this video, is once you've decided on your sort of pros and cons, you're either going to lose out on hot throw, cold throw, aesthetics, and just how it looks. You're going to have to find a happy balance of where you want to be. So with that said, we can move on to a slightly different blend. So you can get parasoy, which is a blend of highly refined paraffin wax and soy. It might be like 20% paraffin and maybe 80% soy wax. And that is a good place to go if you want to get really good smelly candles, as well as having some of those kind of more sustainable, slow burning effects. And it's something I've been playing around with recently. I've been using CS2 blend from Candle Shack, and it is really good. The hot throw and the cold throw is amazing. It's some of the best I've had with any of my candle experiments, but I simply can't get it to not produce wet spots. I just get so many wet spots. They look perfect for a couple of days, and as the temperature fluctuations happen, it just pulls away from the outside, and I just get candles that don't look so great. For me, anyway. I could get a label that goes around the outside, and I could hide it that way, or I could try sort of opaque jars, because then it doesn't really matter, because you can't really see the wet spots in that. So if wet spots are something you're not really worried about, then try different glass jars or try some tins, and then you can avoid all of that entirely. So as I've touched on, there are different blends with soy wax. Things like coconut wax do improve the hot throw. Adding paraffin wax to soy wax does improve the hot throw. So really it is just about picking what you want to do and then just experimenting with some waxes. I've tried lots of different waxes. I've tried C6, which is another coconut soy blend, and I got a really good hot throw from it, but I just lost out on those sort of aesthetically pleasing benefits that I want. It just pulled away from the jar. It's got so many wet spots. I've got a little bit like bubbling tops, loads of sinkholes. I just couldn't get it to work, but it did have a really good hot throw. And then I've tried C3 and 464, and I just really struggled with wet spots with that, a few sinkholes, a bit of frosting, and the reset on those isn't great. So the reset is when you burn a candle and then it sort of reforms. Sometimes you get those bubbly bits on tops, and that's totally normal with a lot of candle waxes. But like I said, for me, maybe a bit vain with my candles, I want a perfect little reset. So that is what I get with this candle wax, the SEX wax from Candle Shack. Whether it will zoom in on that and focus. Yeah, there we are. So you can see that's just a lovely reset. But it's about picking the pros and cons with these things and just working out what you want. I've worked with beeswax before. It makes beautiful candles. You get a really good soft glow with a sort of lovely little honey scent in the background. But with that, it's just, you have to pour it at such a specific temperature, about 63 degrees, and it starts to set so quickly. It is just a nightmare to work with. The wax sets, it starts setting in your jugs, and it's just really hard to just do it consistently. And I found I got a lot of wet spots with that in these glass jars because it pulled away. It's a really hard wax. It was quite hard to wick because the wax was so hard. It just needed such a big flame. I was just worried about fire hazards. Palm wax I haven't really used, and I think that probably covers most waxes. I have gone through and done a bit of a series where I've tested different waxes and I've just seen how they perform for me. And at the moment, what I'm using is SEX wax. That has got the best benefits, but I am playing around with blending my own waxes. So I'm trying to blend at the moment, I think S41 with CS2 from Candle Shack. So I'm trying to blend a soy wax with a highly refined mineral wax and soy wax, and just seeing if I can eke out that hot throw, because I'm not convinced the hot throw from SEX wax is the best. And I've had a few people complain about my candles on Amazon, just saying they don't smell. So I do wonder whether I can improve them, and that is the quest I'm always on. I'm always trying to improve my product and make it the best thing I can possibly sell. So I'm just playing around with that. I do maybe miss out on them being strictly soy, but I think 10-20% in there. You don't necessarily need to list or talk about the wax you use. People like, I don't know, Joe Malone, all the fancy candle sort of makers and shops, they don't list the wax. They don't tell you what is in the wax blend. You have to list sort of the fragrance oils in there for the CLP reasons and legal reasons, but you don't need to list the wax and say what it is in there. So I could say I'm using like a plant-based wax, or I could, well, maybe that's a bit misleading, but you know what I mean. I don't need to allude to the wax I'm using. So I'm playing around with things like that just to see what I can do to eke out the best hot throw and provide the best possible product. So that is it. I'm hoping that is useful, hoping that helps. Going back to the beginning, you need to decide on what kind of candle you want to make and then work out what kind of wax and the benefits you want from it. A good starting place is something like 464 and C3. It is quite cheap to buy and it's quite cheap to sort of play around with. And then maybe try a parasoy blend. Just buy small amounts of each one. So I think you can get them all in sort of 800 gram bits and just play around with them. I'd also buy a small amount of wicks and just test them as well, because wicking is the next sort of hurdle you need to sort of go through. So it is quite a tedious process. It can be quite rewarding making candles, especially when you get it right, but there's just quite a few loopholes you need to go through to get there first. I ran out of battery right at the end there, but I'll leave the video there. Like I said, I'm hoping you find it useful. If you have, give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more candle content. Bye-bye.